this project is implemented in close cooperation with Slovak Foreign Policy Association and is funded by Slovak Aid. I will briefly, my name is Michael Skierelli, I represent Policy and Management Consulting Group. I will co-chair this working group meeting with Ms. Marita Kaldunia, representing the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development. I will briefly introduce the agenda and then pass to Marita. We will listen to the presentation and recommendations of the Georgian experts, Ms. Ekaterina Bukate and Nino Edilashvili. Then we will listen to presentation and recommendation of our Slovak friend, Mr. Matima. And this part will be followed by discussion and conclusions, which will be reflected in the final recommendation of our Georgian colleagues.
First of all, I would like to welcome everyone here today, and I would like to thank the Michaela Foundation for today's working group meeting. As you know, the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia is coordinating the DCFTA implementation in the country, and I myself is coordinator of this process. So I would like to highlight that our today's stand, the SPS, is the most sensitive issue with regard to DCFTA implementation. This is a very sensitive issue because more than half of Georgia's population is employed in the agricultural sector, and the reforms implemented in that sector will impact on those population, and if we will not be very careful in the process of implementation of these reforms, we may have a quite negative impact. So that's why we were very careful while designing the SPS approximation list according to the DCFTA itself. This is the only chapter where the DCFTA do not have the approximation list agreement itself, if you will look at the agreement. And we agreed with the European Union that in 6 months after the DCFTA will enter into force, Georgia will provide the SPS approximation list with timelines. And we did it by the end of February 2015. After that, we had quite intensive consultations with the European Commission experts, and the list was changed according to their recommendations. And now we have the final list that covers about 13 years period of approximation. 13 years because this issue is very sensitive for Georgia. And today our main topic is safety of cheese production. Okay, we think that Georgian cheese had quite good opportunities to be exported to the EU market in case you will satisfy the food safety requirements that the EU has. So once again, I would like to thank all participants and wish you all fruitful discussion. Thank you. And please, our experts will present their findings with regard to cheese production in Georgia.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. I would like to kickstart the presentation on the proposed topic. My name is Nino Edilashvili, and I'm the Food Security Officer. I work for the Oxford in Georgia. And for this time, I've been asked by Michaela's Foundation to help them to briefly outline what can be the main gaps and challenges in the cheese production particularly. In relation to the safety implementation process. So the structure of this presentation will cover 2 parts. I will talk about the first part, and my colleague Katarina will continue with the second part. So the first part will concern the general overview of the policy environment that has an impact on cheese production in general. I will divide the policy environment into 2 main parts, macro and micro analysis of the policy. And I'll talk about the macro analysis in light of the different policies that directly doesn't have any relation to cheese production, but indirectly has an impact at the final outcome of the cheese production in Georgia. And finally, I will identify some of the opportunities that might have a sense to tackle, considering that the whole approximation process and SPSS procedure is really difficult and overwhelming, and we all understand that it's not a one-day solution. And in the second part, my colleague will continue with specific technical requirements of the food safety. We will talk about the laboratory testing capacities and identify some of the gaps and challenges in the Georgian cheese standards as well. So the overall objective of the consultancy was to, as I said, identify the gaps and opportunities in cheese production in light of the DCFTA agreement implementation process. So to start with the overview of the enabling policy environment, we should also mention that the demand in cheese products in Georgia is also very high. According to several estimations, there is no official data or official research on that. There have been some different attempts to identify what is the scale of cheese and milk consumption in Georgia. But according to some estimations, several thousands of tons of milk powder is imported in Georgia, and we all know that most of the product that is being produced in this country is made by the powder milk rather than raw milk. So this basically indicates the fact that the raw milk production is extremely low in this country. It's one of the first challenges to tackle the raw milk production before we go on to the cheese details. So in the first part, I will identify some of the intersectorial challenges that has an impact on the milk production in the first place. So this is the macro part of the analysis, and then I will go down into the micro part, which specifically concerns the cheese sector. So in this previous slide, I've identified three main areas. This is the animal feed, pastures, and veterinary. These are the other sectors, not directly related to cheese, but which has a direct impact on the final outcome of the cheese production. The first very important challenge is the veterinary thing. In Georgia, up until now, Georgia state provides the vaccination free of charge to certain diseases. But according to some experts and according to the acknowledged idea of the existing social policy, there has been a negative link between the existing social policy which exists in Georgia and the veterinary vaccination which the government provides free of charge. So what is the link? I will explain now in several ways. So we all know that majority of Georgian population, around 300,000 individuals, are receiving the social assistance within the framework of the state social assistance program, which entails that certain criteria needs to be satisfied, such as the assets disposable at the individual's disposal, and it's tied to the assistance. So it means that there are certain people. It also depends on the empirical observation. We do not have the official study on this, but it's just an empirical observation, which means that certain people who are, majority of people who are receiving this assistance also are possessing several livestock in their disposal. And they do not have any intention and motivation to disclose those livestock and to allow the state officials to vaccinate these livestock, which means that even though the state has a very good will to vaccinate them, the people do not have a motivation to show this livestock, and this really creates a really vicious circle of the spread of diseases, because certain livestock is vaccinated and certain are not, because of this lack of motivation of the individuals to proactively show the motivation to vaccinate them, because they might be losing the social assistance as a result of the exposure of their assets as a livestock. This is extremely sensitive thing as well, and I think this is it's worth giving a thought on this as well, in order to design a social policy in a way that not to allow the individuals to lose the social assistance, which we all agree that people rely on that very heavily, and on the other hand, motivate them in order to comply with all the veterinary requirements that are implemented by the very good will of Georgian government. Another area is the pastures area. Pastures is again, very directly related to milk production and vice versa to the cheese production. Well-maintained pastures gives a better feed for the livestock, and this needs to be institutionalized as well, and it needs to be tackled as well, other than the food hygiene requirements. And also, one of the challenges that we have identified, again, with the empirical evidence, is that the pastures adjacent to the borderlines of Georgia can be in a very precarious situation, which means that the borderlines are not controlled to a certain level, and the livestock movement is not controlled as well. So there is a risk, unmanageable risk, that the livestock from the adjacent countries' borders can cross the lines of Georgia, and it also creates a very sensitive risk of spreading the diseases, which is something that needs to be taken into consideration while implementing all these food safety requirements. And the final challenge which we identified was the animal feed sector. So when we are talking about the cheese and milk processing facilities, it's also important to keep in mind that the adjacent business lines need to be also developed. What it means is that without a proper formalized sector of the animal feed, the small and medium enterprise, we are talking now here about the farms who are trying to focus on the HACCP requirements, who are trying to comply to these requirements and have an ambition to export and have an ambition to reduce the cost and increase the quality. So we have identified this gap is that these factories and these farms have a problem with the highly informalized sector of the animal feed. So what it means is that when they are buying the animal feed from the suppliers, the animal feed sellers cannot always guarantee the receipt of the payment, which means that in the accounting system of the farms, this receipt is recognized in the accounting system as an expense rather than as an input, and they cannot even out the VAT tax, which means that they are paying VAT tax on more VAT tax than they should be paying. So it means that the unit cost is increasing when these enterprises are dealing with the highly formalized sector of the animal feed. And which means that, again, animal feed, the government should incentivize the animal feed producers and these adjacent lines to be highly formalized and to be recognized as an economic actors as well. Understandably enough, there are many challenges that need to be overcome at the same time, simultaneously. Those macro level things which are not directly, as I said, related but has an indirect impact on the final production, and then we have the micro level situation as well. So we need a two-track approach. Rather than focusing on one level of challenges, we need to understand that it's a very, very multi-stakeholder, the multi-layered situation in the cheese production. So what can be some of the short-term deliverables that can kickstart the revitalization of the cheese sector in Georgia in general? So we know that those challenges are really overwhelming, but there still can be some areas where the focus, where the government and civil society can increase the focus, such as, for example, Georgian indigenous cheese production and cheese branding. There is one lady who is an ethnographist and an independent researcher, Anna Mikhaladze, and I think many of you might be aware of her. And she proactively researched over 80 varieties of Georgian cheese, and to our surprise, we have more than 4 or 5 varieties of cheese. So she's very enthusiastic to document the cheese receipts, and she's very enthusiastic to share this receipt with others as well. And some of the names are Istanbul Hacho, Tushuri Buddha, Chogima, Suriche, Chiviaja. So those are the cheese varieties that are not even widespread in the overall and general consumption among the Georgian population as well. So one of our recommendations is that it might make sense to focus on revitalizing of this peculiar indigenous Georgian cheese and position them as part of the Georgian marketing, as part of the food tourism. So, of course, the CFTA agreement gave lots of opportunities and lots of expectations as well for the Georgian population, Georgian producers to export food overseas in the European Union, but we all understand that it might take quite a long process, and we need to be realistic on that as well. So one of the ways to initially kickstart the process of positioning the cheese as a product of Georgia, it might be a good idea to tie the cheese branding to the food tourism of Georgia. Because right now we know that Georgia can be seen among the top lists of world food tourism destinations, and Georgian cuisine is regarded as one of the very exotic and interesting for the tourists. So it might make good sense that the government adopts a certain strategy to incorporate the cheese, Georgian indigenous cheese, as part of the Georgian diet and Georgian cuisine, and promote it as part of branding Georgia as a tourist destination. As part of this initiative, it's also important to utilize the Georgia's natural position of the bioproduction and niche production, which with geographical indications. And it's fortunate that Georgia still has several destinations where the cheese can be produced with the eco-friendly requirements without much investment, such as those isolated mountains of Georgia, such as Sonete and Tusheti, which are considered to be relatively eco-friendly zones that can have a potential to produce certain cheese brands that can be located into the niche marketing. And also revitalizing ancient cheese receipts. I think it's a very good untapped capacity and potential of Georgia to research and to encourage Sakpadendi as well to register those brands as Georgia's inheritance, if you like to call it like that. So to put it into the nutshell, I have grouped recommendations in two parts: macro level recommendations and micro level recommendations. In the macro level, we identified three main areas. This is the need to redesign the social policy in order to motivate individuals to openly register their livestock and to eliminate the risk of the veterinary spreading diseases. So this can be beneficial to the overall reform into the veterinary system as well. So there is a very close link, and also considering the fact that almost every Georgian smallholder farm and family farm, and especially vulnerable families, do have the livestock in their disposal. So I think this is something that can be given a thought. The specific border controls that means that the adjacent pasture lines of the different countries, of our neighboring countries, needs to be controlled in a systematized manner to control the livestock movement. And also the formalization of the adjacent business lines in order for the food business operators and cheese business operators to formalize their transactions and to sophisticate their business transactions and the accounting system in order to claim the taxes, VAT taxes. And on the micro level, we thought that government support schemes in the cheese producing cooperatives, which are focusing on these indigenous, really exotic cheese brands that Georgia should go through into positioning the country as a cheese, interesting cheese country. So by this initiative, the government can filter down naturally those cooperatives who are focusing only on the certain types of cheese to maximize the impact and to maximize the efficiency. The campaign process is an inevitable part of all these recommendations. The positioning of Georgian cheese needs to be done along with positioning Georgia as a food tourist destination. And continue to support the registration process of the cheese brands proactively. And we need to, the Sakpadendi has been quite cooperative up until now, and it's important to encourage to continue in this way. Also facilitate the creation of the Cheesemakers Association. We do not have the institutionalized manner Cheesemakers Association who would be strong in the market and who would get an exposure to all the recent developments and to give them the bargaining power as well. And the involvement of NGO sector into facilitation, because up until now lots of international and local NGOs have been implementing really interesting projects in dairy and cheese sector as well. The facilitation of the exchange visits, that's also quite useful, especially in the field which is not that's developed. So exchange visits through the association can be also an idea. And of course, finally, last but not least, the comply with the hygienic requirements, which continues to be the most challenging part of this sector, both in terms of milk production and cheese production as well. And with this, my colleagues will continue with the more details and technical requirements that Georgia has been facing in terms of food safety requirements. And I ask Katerina to hand over the presentation.
Hello again, I'm a food safety expert. I'm working in different directions as a food safety expert at CIB, Institute of Comprehensive Institution Building at National Food Agency. And also I'm working as a private consultant with various of donors. I have wanted to be a food safety expert of, for example, Mercy Corps organization, and I had chance to travel a lot with them and their companies to the different parts of Georgia, Kartli, Ajara Mountains, very beautiful but very difficult areas for living and working and developing of food business. And so I have on my hands different knowledge from the really farm to fork and from legislative part of this business really. So I want to highlight that it's not really not an easy task to improve the situation in this area, and now we are focusing on the cheese production area, yes, because we have chance, as Nino mentioned, we have chance to export this product to develop our traditional cheeses. But first of all, of course, we have to somehow satisfy the Georgian consumers and think about the safety and the quality of the cheese which our families are consumption. Yes. So I want to highlight that we need a very large campaign, really very large campaign of implementation of different kind of activities from different governmental organizations, authorities, and of course with the huge support of donors. First of all, as you mentioned, already you mentioned that we are on the way of approximation of the Georgian legislation, and it's really not an easy task. We have more than 400 EU regulations to be not only translated but adopted, approximated to Georgian legislation, and it's not easy. Maybe yes, it is easy to translate and put it on paper somewhere in the cabinet, but you have to push it to the producers, to food business operators, to the consumers and inspectors who are working at the National Food Agency. They have to have understanding of these documents, not only translation and approximation and taking them into force by a governmental decree, but they have to understand this. And unfortunately, we have some documents already which are in force, but they are not fully approximated. There are a lot of derogations from the main food safety regulations of EU legislation. For example, HACCP implementation. For in EU, it's mandatory for all levels except primary production. In Georgia, it's mandatory for only two sectors, raw milk processing and slaughterhouses. We have 400 of such companies, and it is really 2 years this process is going of implementation of HACCP, and it is moving very, very slowly and very difficult. Because when you are asking for one FBO producer who already is registered, that you have to do a lot of stuff to implement HACCP. Nearby his neighbor, he is not registered, he is not on the list of NFA inspection, so on, and he's placing his product on the market, not maybe in supermarket and retailer chain, and his price maybe is a little bit lower, but still he is on the market, and they are in a very large competition. So the food safety management system should be implemented for every business operator for all levels. It is very important to put all producers on the same level of control and requirements and so on. So changing of the legislation must be a little bit more faster, I think every part must be considered, every stakeholder must be considered, and so public awareness also must be increased in this direction. So the whole food chain must be aware what is food safety and what is the requirements of EU legislation. For example, we have very low awareness regarding antibiotics. For example, by this implementation of HACCP and some of FPOs who are producing cheese, they put pasteurization equipment. But, and yes, maybe microbiological hazards are lower of their products, but no, they are not checking antibiotics. And it's not a requirement in our legislation yet. And they are not aware regarding it, and public is not aware regarding the hazards of the antibiotics in the cheese and so on. So this campaign should be started and more pushed for the whole level, governmental level, producers level, consumers level. And improvement market control and surveillance system. Yes, we have NFA now, and it's really developing very fast, and I am in this process, I'm involved in this process. I'm very glad to see that 2 years ago they had only 30 inspectors, now they have more than 100 inspectors, and they are going trainings very often, and they are developing, but still we have problem with proper control system and market surveillance system, because we don't have list of FPOs, proper list of FPOs, we don't know who must be under control. There are about 70,000 of FPO, of LLCs, different companies in the list of register, but are they under the control of NFA? Should they be under the control of NFA? So, first of all, the primary production, yes, it is not mandatory even in EU legislation to implement HACCP principles on the primary production. But EU is going to consider the legislation and maybe change this requirement. And because this is their experience already, that yes, the control must start from the primary production, which is totally without control now in Georgia. And we have to consider this. We have to somehow find very flexible, very simple, but still rules for primary production to make them to implement some kind of hygiene rules and to force them to be in line with this requirement. Also the traceability system, it's a real problem in Georgia, because everyone, we, every day, are going to markets and buying products. Cheese in some kind of packaging without any label, any name of producer and so on. It's really difficult. Even in a good retailer sector, we are not sure where this cheese comes from. They have a label of their market name. For example, it was packaging by blah blah market, but we don't know who is behind of this product. Really not even me, food safety expert, who is always trying to read labeling. I'm not sure what I need, especially cheese, especially this dairy products. I'm not always sure what I need. So this traceability and labeling and consumer information system should be on place, and it must be developed much more better than it is now. And the main EU document 178 must be, our legislation must be fully in line with this requirement. It means that all of FPOs must implement HACCP. Very often, when we buy the program of MES, for example, I'm going to a business operator to make an assessment. There is a big building, so they spend a lot of money. money to build this building, and there is no correct way of moving of product, of raw materials, of personnel, so they have to make a lot of renovations and spend again money and again money, and sometimes it's twice more than for the, if they consider the proper plan of the building before they will start, these expenses will be much more lower. So the approval procedure of FBOs must be much more, so it must be improved. If someone wants to start food business, he or she must be aware where he is going, what he is going to do, what kind of building must be for this business, what is the requirements of safety of raw materials, safety of production, what level of education is needed to produce this kind of product, what hazards are in this product. The establishment of companies is so easy in Georgia. You need only one day, you are going to register, signing one document, paying money, and that's it. You already have a business. But you have no understanding of this business, no education for this business. Everybody knows that they must have an accountant. They must have an accountant, but nobody knows that they must have a specialist of food safety. In EU, it is required, for example, if you want to establish FBO, food business operator, you must go and show what kind of premises you are going to build, what staff do you have, what is the education, what is their health, conditions of the health of the personnel you are going to work with, what are the national requirements, local requirements for food safety. And we must put these requirements into our legislation. It must not be so easy to create a company for food business, because afterwards we will have a problem with safety of health, and there will be a danger of life for consumers. The improvement of laboratory testing, yes, it is really big problem, because there was no control and no producers were going to pay for laboratory testing. As now it is much more, there are a lot of requirements from NFA, they're looking for laboratories, and we have, for example, for antibiotic testing, we have only one laboratory in the country which is providing its service for 600 lives. 600 lives for one antibiotic testing, for 4 different antibiotics. So it's really huge amount for the producer who is going to test his milk first time, and now he discovers that he must pay such a huge amount for this testing. And of course he thinks, why should I pay this? I was working without any testing for so many years, why should I start to test it now? Nobody is asking for me. Only once per year NFA is coming, okay, I will do it maybe once per year, okay. But antibiotics is a problem. It must be tested per batch. For every batch of the milk which is coming to a company, it must be tested for the antibiotics. Otherwise, there will be residues in the cheese, and we will have a problem with the consumer health safety. So,
is it required by the law that they should do this type of test?
From the June 3rd, there will be in the fourth the EU regulation, which was already translated and adopted in the Georgian requirement regarding chemical residues in products. Yes, it will be required, but
if they are registered.
If they are registered, if this company is registered, if it's an FPO, and so on and so on. So we are again moving on this closed circle that who is not registered, who is placing this product somewhere in the street or in the market and so on without any registration, it's not tested and it's not checked and so on.
But it's not necessary to be the confirmatory test of 600 GL with HPLC. It can be a screening test with the price level of some GL or
yes,
test.
of course, but the abuse are not aware regarding this. They know that they have to test antibiotics where in laboratory. They are not aware that they can buy this machine and make this testing at their plant themselves but still this machine is about 22,000 laris. So it's a big investment for them. And so I think that donors must somehow gather and discuss this question, and maybe there should be some kind of governmental campaign regarding subsidizing this kind of activities and so on, to establish this approach that milk and dairy products should be tested for antibiotics. And to develop more, maybe more rapidly, the capacity of laboratory testing. As Nina already mentioned, we have very nice and interesting sorts of cheeses, different kind of cheeses, and Anamika is working on them, but most of them are registered on SACPAT, but this registration is only verbally, very lightly description. We don't have any standards. Still, our producers are working with costs. They cut some pieces which they like from these costs, everything else is taken away. And they created this as so-called MST, SAS producer standard, which is not confirmed that it's a real document and any of science or any background, and it has any kind of background, real background for these standards. And they are producing and putting this name of the standard, but we don't know what it is. And for many of these kind of cheeses, traditional cheeses, we don't have even this kind of documents. So I think we have standardization and metrology authority in Georgia. We have a scientific research center in Georgia. We have ministry, different kind of ministries who can maybe create a group, working group, which can sit. They will invite scientists, cheese producers, donors, and the real good standards could be prepared for these products to develop product safely. For example, Gouda is not made in Gouda anymore. Only one producer maybe in Georgia is making Gouda in real Gouda. It is made in some different plastic bags without any control. So we have to push this kind of, first of all, to have a good product, and then to push to develop this sector. And the final one, I want to also mention that it could not be done by only authorities or maybe by donors. The very large public awareness campaign should be started. Consumers themselves, they have right to buy good product, and when they are paying for this product, they are developing this system, yes, because everything is moved by money. So if consumer will be aware that the cheese which is sold in the streets from the bags of the cars, it could not be safe. They have to ask from the local government officials and others to create a system for the food safety, and especially as we are now talking regarding cheese, for cheese safety, to develop this sector and to get more safe products, especially dairy products. Thank you. I'm ready to answer your questions if you have this.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. I have a lot of questions and comments on that. It is too bad that nobody is representing the Ministry of Agriculture or Food Safety Agency today. It seems that I am the only representative of the state here. So I will comment some of your suggestions and recommendations, although I am not a food safety expert, but I'm coordinating this process, the DCFTA negotiations, preparations, negotiations, and now implementation starting from 2008. So I know a lot about different areas of the DCFTA, including the food safety. And I totally agree with you that the food safety conditions should be very much improved in Georgia. Nobody argues that. We all want to eat the safe food. and I want to live in a country like European Union member state. But unfortunately, we live in Georgia, where we have very, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, yes, where we have a very high rate of unemployment, where we have a lot of people living below poverty line, and let's imagine if we will start to control, you have mentioned the primary production. Let's imagine in 1 month we start the control of primary production in Georgia. What will happen?
Uprise.
No,
Sure.
they will start to say.
So that would be very difficult. It would not difficult, but it will be impossible to do in Georgia in a condition that Georgia is now. So it is very difficult to find the balance between controlling food safety and you were saying that consumers have a right to consume safe food. But consumers also the population have a right to eat cheese. Let's say, thanks to my job, I'm always buying the cheese produced by Santino. This is the most expensive cheese, Georgian cheese, that you can find in markets, yes? And I'm paying for that, I don't know, 18 or 19 lari per kilo. So let's imagine, today we will start the controlling traceability of all cheese producers, require from them to test antibiotics and so on, and the price for cheese will be not 19 laris, but even more. Yes, it will be more because Sante and like companies like Sante will be the monopoly companies on the cheese market, and the prices will go high. I am an economist, you can trust me on that. So the price for 1 kilo cheese will be about 25 lari.
No.
So what we will tell the population, if you cannot afford to pay 20-25 lari per kilo, then do not eat at all cheese?
No.
Of course not, I agree with you. So that's why we were very careful when negotiating the SPS chapter, and even European Commission understood that is very sensitive issue for Georgia. And they gave us the right not to negotiate the approximation of Georgia's legislation during the negotiation period, but they gave us more time to think about this, to be very careful, to analyze the situation in Georgia, and only after that prepare the approximation list. And it covers, I have already mentioned, about 13 years period. So we took such a long period because we have to step by step approximate our legislation to European Union acquis in order not to have a very negative impact on the economy in Georgia. Because when we just started to think about the DCFTA negotiations with the European Union, and it was a preparation period for that. That preparation period lasted about more than 2 years. So during that period, we studied the experience of different countries. Of course, nobody has the same experience as Georgia, but we studied the experience, let's say, of Baltic countries, that Marty can agree with that. So, and Baltic countries have a quite negative experience when they very quickly approximated the legislation in the food safety area. About 70% of small farmers were just bankrupted. But at that time, that countries where they had a membership perspective to the European Union. That's why the European Union gave them a lot of money to subsidize this negative effect. Unfortunately, we do not have a membership perspective yet. Nobody will give us such amount of money. That's why we should be very careful and to count only on our resources. and to be very careful to implement this reform in Georgia. I agree with you that it is very much needed to implement the approximation with the European Union acquis and to protect the consumers' right to consume the safe food. That's why we step by step are going to do that. But we need time for that. So, and about the derogation from the EU legislation that has been already approximated. So I must say that the DCFTA envisaged approximation of Georgia's legislation to the European Union acquis and does not envisage to copy-paste the legislation. So Georgia can derogate from some of the parts of EU legislation if it is needed in Georgia. So that's why sometimes I agree with you that our approximated legislation is not one-at-one same as EU legislation, but that is a right of Georgia to do that. And we have negotiated that during the negotiation process with the European Union. So I think more or less I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Unfortunately, I cannot deeply go into details because I am not a food safety expert. But that is
standards for which the GSM is the Ministry of Economics. So
yes.
You
Yes.
can push this process.
And what will be the benefit of that? If we will have the standard for cheese. So what is the benefit of that? Okay, because you have talked about this, Mark, but I have not a clear picture what is the benefit of having standards on every product.
Can I add something? You mentioned Santino. I think you have to be aware that Santino is mostly made from the milk powder.
No, that is from roaming. Santino is made from the raw. Sante is made, yes.
Sorry, so this is the Sante Lactalis is using two brands which consumers confuse all the time. The original Sante brand is really made of raw milk. It is not available everywhere because there is not enough raw milk. The Santissimo brand is made of powder. So Santino is raw milk brand and Santissimo is.
I think the standard will, for example, give possibility at least to know that what we call cheese is produced from the raw milk, not from the powder.
Yes, we have already that regulation in Georgia. If the product is marked that is a milk product, it should be produced from the milk. Yes, we have this kind of.
But it doesn't
Yeah.
cover cheese.
Yeah.
It doesn't cover cheese.
We have
Only
this for
fluid.
butter.
Yeah, fluid.
Yes.
We
Okay.
have with the cheese.
So the consumers, we should raise awareness of consumers. Let's say I agree with you that people should not buy the cheese from the back of the car. Yes, people should not, but they do that. Why do they buy them? So we should raise awareness of consumers that is unsafe in Georgia. If we will do that, sorry.
Is this you on the picture? No?
I think no.
Where are you working at Marsha? It's very from
So
Marsha. Where are you working at Marsha?
Marsha?
Yeah. No. Sorry then, because I'm moving with this video for a training for more than 4 years, and the face was very familiar.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to ask. Sorry, but regarding that. So, I have the very big experience of working with slaughterhouses which are under the HACCP mandatory requirements. First of all, it was a very difficult process to make them to slaughter animals at the slaughterhouses. Even in our parliament, it was very difficult to push this legislation, and only 4 voices we had luck to not have less. Only 4 voices were different for to sell. So, when they started to real renovation, development and improvement of their businesses, now we have about 90 slaughterhouses in the country, and every day someone please help me to make a new plan for the slaughterhouse, because he thinks that his neighbor, the next year, he made his slaughterhouse very renovated, painted, the door is closed, the staff is wearing safe clothes and so on, and he sees that this business is developing, and now he wants to open his own. So, for example, enforcement of the legislation regarding HACCP and slaughterhouse didn't stop this business, it developed this business. And more people want to start this business. So, maybe from the one part of the hand, yes, first investments will be a little bit higher, but then when they will have a good premises for production, when they will produce a good cheese with a good labeling, they will put this product to the better place for selling. Not in the yards and by the car and outside in the streets. They will take the product to the good supermarket and say, I have good premises, I am checking my product, I'm making pasteurization, I'm labeling it, I'm packaging it, so my price will be not 8 lari, but 10 lari. And yes, we have this kind of experience when this strict requirement didn't close this business, but improved this business. So, maybe yes, you are economist and you are looking from the different side of this, but I'm looking from my side. When this cheese is better, people are paying for this, and they are ready to pay a little bit more for a good product than to pay for healing at the hospitals, at the doctors, for medicines and so on. Antibiotics in dairy product, what does it mean? When you have any disease and you have to intake antibiotics, it will not work, because your organism is under the resistance to the antibiotics and it won't work when you really need them. So people should know this. We have a very good health minister. He had in last year we had a week of antibiotics awareness for public, not to intake them without prescription. And yes, this first they had. When I was going to villages for training and I was telling them, please don't give your cows antibiotics. I'm giving it to my children. I'm drinking myself. Why cannot I give it to my cow? Now I was telling them that please don't drink yourself, don't give it to your children, and don't give it to your cow, because it will create a resistance in your body. So now they are a little bit more aware, and they are trying to, in villages where we have trainings here in the Mercy Corps, they have numbers how the situation improved when we did this kind of public awareness trainings and so on. And please don't be afraid, really, don't be afraid as an official, don't be afraid to push forward some strict regulations, because from the other hand, you will have a very satisfied consumers who will be very thankful to you that this situation was improved.
I would suggest we continue according to our agenda and listen